Okay, so today I'm going to be teaching you how to finish off your hoop with thread. So what we're going to be left with is none of this fabric, and you'll just see the screw at the top, and the rest of the outside of the hoop is going to be covered with thread. So what you're going to need for this process is you're going to need a pair of scissors, you're going to need a needle. I suggest quite a long needle because you are going to be pushing it through the hoop, so you need to have enough of it to grab at the other side after you've gone past the width of the hoop. And you're also going to need your thread. Now, I suggest a complementary or similar colour. So I've gone with this purple from the rose. You will need quite a lot of it. I'm using a 3-inch hoop and I have got a full bobbin's worth just in case. So I'll let you know at the end what you might need, but if you're using a big hoop, then just make sure you have lots of that colour on hand just in case. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to trim off our excess fabric. Now make sure that your embroidery is exactly in your hoop where you want it. So it's central or off centre if it's that kind of design. But make sure it's where you want it and make sure it's drum tight. So just pull gently on each edge to make sure the fabric is really, really tight, and make sure your hoop is really, really tight so it's holding it steady. So once you've done that, turn it over, and all you're going to do is you're going to take your scissors and you are going to cut the fabric right next to the embroidery hoop. So cut all of the excess off. Now don't worry that you will still be able to see the little edge of the fabric, because that is going to get covered with our thread in the next step. But just try and get as much off as you can, because that does help. So just pop all of your mess to one side, you won't need any of that fabric. And if you do have any thread ends, like I've got one just there, just give it a snip. You will be able to see the back of your design, so just be aware of that. If you don't want to see the back of your design, then you could cut a circle of felt and stick that to the back of your design before you start. But I'm going to leave mine exposed because I think that's quite nice. So take your thread. I suggest not using too long a length. Normally an arm's length is the recommended length to use, but I normally use a bit more than that. So you're going to want 2 strands of embroidery floss, so separate them out. So thread that up, but don't put a knot in the end or anything. Just leave it loose for now. So turn your hoop over to the front, because this is where you're going to want to be, because we want to make the front as neat as possible. So put your needle against the hoop and take it through to the front. So you want to come as close to the hoop as you can. It will, obviously you'll end up with this border at the front because you can't see the inner hoop from the front, but that's fine. So pull it through, but when you get to your thread end, so my thread end here, just hold that along your design and then bring your needle up right next to where you just came up. Making sure that you catch your thread end. And then you've made this little lay of thread across the hoop. Lay your next one across the hoop and come up just next to it. Making sure you're always catching this thread end here. Now after you've done a few stitches, if you have caught your thread end, then by all means you can snip it off, which I am going to do now. That bit of the process becomes much easier after the first section, the first length of thread that you put in. For the rest of this length of thread, I am going to speed things up because it is just exactly the same process. You come up, you lay your thread across, and then you come up again. So I'll speed this bit up and then I'm going to show you what it looks like to finish off your thread and start a new one, because you will need to do that several times on your way round. And then I will also thoroughly explain this little bit here, which is slightly different because obviously we haven't got the outer hoop there and we need to catch all of the fabric. Okay, so here I've come to the end of my thread. I've still got a little length of it, but I'm going to finish it off here. So lay your thread across where you would normally pop it. Turn your hoop over, keeping your finger on that thread behind. So what you're going to do is you're just going to slide your needle underneath all the stitching that you've previously got on the back of your hoop. Don't pull too tight. And then we're just going to loop back through the last 3 or so that we came under. And again, don't pull it too tight because you don't want to distort the back of this, because you do want to cover that fabric. But that will just keep that secure and that will keep all of that thread in place. And then you can just snip it as close to the thread as you can get it. So I'm now going to prepare my next piece of thread. So with this piece of thread, we obviously want the thread to come out this end, so that the way that we're working around the hoop, which I do recommend you go clockwise if you're right-handed, but if you're left-handed, I don't know if you might find it easier to go anti-clockwise, it's up to you. But make sure that you are holding your hoop, so you're putting your needle through in the direction that you want your thread to come out. So what we're going to do is maybe start about halfway along this section and just take our needle under. Now don't pull your thread all the way through. Leave a little tail that we'll cut off in a sec, and then just through the last 3 or so again. And that will just secure your thread in place. Now you don't need to pull too tightly, and snip the end off. And now just be careful with your first stitch or so that you're not pulling your thread out that you've just prepared, but it should stay pretty well secure. And then just carry on as you have been in the same way around the rest of the hoop. So it's going to take quite a while to get around this hoop, so again I'm going to speed that up for you and come back when I get to the screw, which is a little bit different. When you get to the metal bits, just go over them in the same way that you've been going over the wood. That's not a problem at all. So I'll come back and show you when I've finished in a minute. Okay, so this is where I've got to. You can see I'm working around this way, so I'm just about to hit the screw. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do now. You can see that when I've gone over the metal, I've just done it in exactly the same way as the bamboo, so it just sort of blends in. So I've just started a new thread. I'm just going to continue as normal. Now you've got to be careful just getting your thread around the screw at that point. But just laying it down next to the previous one as we have been all the way through. So I think I might be able to only fit one more after this one on that bit of metal. So what you've got to do for this bit is you've got to take your needle through the screw and lay it down next to the bamboo and with the next one, lay that down next to the previous thread. It is exactly the same process as we have been doing all the way through. All you've got to make sure is that this fabric here gets covered. So I think I can fit one more on this little section, and then I'm actually going to start a new thread because I'm running low on thread as well. You can see at this point that the back of my thread wrapping is not as neat as the front. Now that's always going to happen because this is the side that we're joining and finishing our threads. So that's why you always work with the design that you have stitched in your embroidery hoop facing you, because that means that the bit that you are making neat is the bit that people will see. So what I'm going to do is just carry on as normal now. So bringing my needle up, looping around the screw, and laying my thread next to the previous stitch each time. I think I'll need one more length after this one to finish off this hoop. I'll speed it up until I get past this metal, and then I will show you the last little bit just to finish off the round. Okay, so I'm getting towards the end of the hoop here. I'm also getting towards the end of this piece of thread, so I'm hoping it's going to last me until I get finished. So really just try not to think about whether your line is going to match up here, just keep going because it's a curve, so it's really hard to tell if it will or not. But if you're still stitching right up against that bamboo hoop, then it should line up really nicely. Try not to subconsciously make your stitches further apart at this point, just to get closer to it, because that won't help in the long run. We don't want to see the join. So there we go. Just trimmed off the last little bit. So here is what the finished hoop looks like. You can see it's a really nice finish around the edge. It creates a border visually, as well as just feeling and looking really nice and silky like your embroidery does. So it's a really nice way to finish things off for ornaments and things like that. As I say, you can see the back of the hoop, but I think that's quite nice. If you didn't want to see the back, then I would suggest just using some felt to pop in there, and that would solve your problem. So there you go, that was how to thread wrap an embroidery hoop, and I would love to see if you do this yourself. So if you do, then just follow the links in the description and tag me in your posts, and I would love to see them.